What's up, RotoViz?
Welcome into the RotoViz Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Curtis Patrick. I'm joined by Dave Caban. Dave, it's our third FFPC Main Event, live stream event, and we're on the clock. We're just getting thrown right into the fire here, man. We'll review what happened in rounds 1 and 2 in a second, but we're on the clock at 2:11. I think our choice here is Josh Jacobs if we want to do something in a hero RB style. And, you know, that's really it. You know, there was a nice run on the receivers that we liked here. So we're either going, I think, Mahomes or Jacobs here. Do you have a preference?
You know, with the way things are setting up here, I don't know if I love the inclusion of trying to like force the hero RB build here. Let's go Mahomes.
So we're going to go Chase and Mahomes. You can't hate it. Yep. And Allen could make it back. Okay. Jacobs or Gibbs could make it back around the turn if we want to just go with a balanced build here. Or we could always go with like our guy Keenan Allen, since we don't want to go with T. Higgins and a Jamar Chase build. But man, let's get around the corner to this 302 pick and run down what's happening, because it's only been a week, but these streets are way different. They're way different, man. They're way different. Everything has changed about the first couple of rounds of the draft. Everyone's got clarity around these injuries that we were uncertain of over the past couple of weeks. And I feel like there's more of an element too of get your guy in these final couple of days. Sean and I had done some drafts together, and it's like you always want to leave, you know, that one player, like, you know, I get to call his name just if I want to. And I think as the draft season comes to a close, you start to really think about who are those players that I haven't built a team around. So team number 1 goes T. Higgins there, so we won't have to face that dilemma. Let's see if he does us a favor here and takes one of the quarterbacks and leaves us both running backs to choose from. At this point in the season, Dave, between Josh Jacobs and Jahmyr Gibbs, you know, do you have a preference there? Thinking about what do these guys look like in week 1? What do they look like in the title week? You know, do you have a lean?
I think I still prefer Josh Jacobs. I think that he has the opportunity to get more of all of the things that you'd be looking for there. So some receiving work, touchdown opportunity. Gibbs, I know there's a lot of excitement over with stories coming out about him being the downfield guy on all of that. But I mean, like, I don't know if it's really going to manifest into, you know, to Gibbs playing receiver and running back. And, you know, this being some type of, you know, Christian McCaffrey like season or Austin Eckler like season for him. So forced to choose in round 3. I think that, in round 3, I think I'd lean Jacobs.
The bailout is Keenan Allen. If we just want to go Keenan Allen, I'm fine taking Jacobs if we want to go that route and stay balanced here through the first 3. It's in.
All right, it's in. Yeah, I was gonna say Jacobs. How close did we come down on the clock there? Actually,
we had 15 seconds, man.
Okay,
we're never gonna bleed this thing out. We're old pros at this point. We might time out in a slow draft once in a while, but we're not gonna time out in a fast draft.
Right.
So let's go back to the top here, man. No real surprises through the first 5 picks. It had been common, you know, over the past couple of days to see Travis Kelce fall more toward the end of the first round. Now getting some clarification that his knee injury, his hyperextension is more of like a bone bruise situation, and he's still listed as questionable for the first game tomorrow. I think the nice thing too is, you know, if you're a Kelce drafter in the main event, as long as you take another usable tight end and you don't just go like solo tight end in your build, you know, with the Chiefs having that Thursday night game, you know, you're not stuck with a 0 if he doesn't play. I mean, you just put somebody else in. And so, you know, that's nice in this format. You don't have, you don't have that luxury, you know, in a best ball draft or, you know, on some of the other platforms that do the tournaments like this. CD Lamb going at 107. That's a little earlier than we commonly see him. That's typically a spot for Bijan Robinson or Stephon Diggs. I have seen St. Brown go that early, so a little conviction on CD Lamb from that manager. Bijan, Garrett Wilson going in the first, which has become trendier. Him and AJ Brown have almost kind of like flipped spots, which is it's kind of crazy to me. Like, they're both great, but at the same time, we're hoping that Garrett Wilson can put up the numbers that AJ Brown has already been putting up. Stephon Diggs, just set your clock to him, but you can get him at 111. A lot of running back activity at the 1-2 turn with Nick Chubb, Tony Pollard, and Saquon Barkley going. And then things stay pretty stable until the same, it's that same spot, man, at the 2-6. The manager that took CD Lamb goes way early and takes Calvin Ridley at the 2-6. Now, his ADP has been climbing. I was looking at some of the RotoViz ADP tools before the draft started with Dave here. And, Ridley is right at that 212, 301 just over the past week. This is another half round yet earlier than that. So going to be a unique build for that manager. You're trying to differentiate with these final drafts here. So, kudos for the conviction play there. And then, really everything has kind of held serve up through the third round until we get to the 3-5 and DJ Moore goes, over a round early. So, Dave, I'm already getting the sense that we've got a couple bold managers in the draft room. I think it's going to be a fun night for us, buddy.
Yeah, this definitely is. The crazy thing really has been the way that ADP has had some radical shifts across the last week. One of the other things we've talked about, Curtis, is how a lot of the guys that we've been on all throughout the summer have been slowly creeping up, which makes them a little bit harder to get onto our rosters now in some cases. The good thing is we have this fairly balanced start with Chase, Mahomes, and Jacobs. I think that leaves us a lot of avenues. And as a result of that, we might have some more options than I felt like we actually had in some of the other builds that we did. The kind of funny thing, though, about being at this 1-2 spot, Curtis, is, I normally like being on the corners, but I was actually feeling much more comfortable when we were in that 11 slot, which we spent a lot of drafts in versus this 2 slot.
Oh, yeah. It's just we have access to a totally different list of players. We get a little deeper in the draft, maybe we'll still end up, with some of our plays that we like after round 10. But these first, these single digit rounds, it's going to be a totally different roster. So, it's going to make waivers different. That's the thing, when you start playing, with any level of volume in these higher dollar, managed roster type tournaments, that's something that you got to think about. So, at the same time, we're going to have, this is like almost going to be like our bailout roster. If all of those drafts, 109, 111, 111, 109 again, if those don't turn out, maybe this is the golden ticket for us here. Okay, so we're getting some comments coming in here. DKB says, I drafted a main from the 102 a few days ago, started Chase Andrews, Josh Allen, like your guys start a lot. I definitely would have taken Mark Andrews if he had fallen to us. I would have loved that. Absolutely would have loved that. I would say, DKB, I like your start better than ours. You got a nice value there on Mark Andrews. Probably went, a little earlier than normal on Josh Allen by ADP, but of those kind of big 3 quarterbacks, it really seems like he's the eye of the beholder guy.
Yep.
He's scored over 400 PPR the past 2 seasons in a row, but it's like, he'll go 1 or 3. But, Mahomes and Hurts are always going right there at that 2-3 turn. But, we've seen Josh Allen go as late as, I think 31 maybe is where we selected him in one of our drafts, Dave. So, that's a great start. If anybody else that's watching wants to share one of their starts from the front half of a recent main or Fantasy Pros Championship draft, or, hey, even an Underdog Best Ball Mania tournament, from today, just curious how people are mixing and matching these players at the front half of drafts today. Dave, I did manage to finish maxing out BBM4 today.
Oh, very
So,
nice.
so I'm done. A round of applause there. I got that done in the portfolio, and I'm 3 drafts away from maxing DraftKings. So I think
Yep.
I'm gonna be in the mood, man. Right after this main event, I think I'm just gonna pound those last DK drafts out. Then I'll be done. And the season has started for me. So as we round the 3rd and 4th round corner here, really, really interesting. We saw DJ Moore the last time we checked in go at the 3-5. Ramondre Stevenson and Najee Harris go in the middle of the 3rd here. Keenan Allen and DK Metcalf, usual suspects towards the back half of that round. Darren Waller, TJ Hawkinson, always here. And then Aaron Jones and Cooper Kupp at the corner. I mean, this manager at the corner started with 3 running backs, reaching on Aaron Jones, and then taking the big gamble on Cooper Kupp. If Kupp only misses a couple games, it's going to be a pretty interesting, robust RB roster, but a lot of fragility there. We'll have to see how that works out. Joe Mixon lasting till the early 4th. He's been commonly going in the 3rd. How are you feeling, Dave? I think we got to take at least one wide receiver at this 4-5 turn. Some of our guys that we like to target in the 4th and 5th round, we may not have access to here. So, obviously we could hope that maybe a guy like Deebo Samuel would fall to us. We have not taken Amari Cooper in one of these types of leagues. He might be somebody that's available. Christian Watson now has an injury question, but would kind of have that upside and volatility associated with the second-year wide receiver breakouts that, RotoViz likes to build around so often. But then, after that, you're talking about what do we just want to go really early on a Deontay Johnson? Do we want to take a gamble on Drake London? This 4-5 turn area is not a hot spot for wide receivers. So I'm curious what you think about the guys who are going to be available.
Yeah. So unfortunately, it's kind of a spot where there's a decent amount of really boring names, and there's a couple of older veterans in here that I'm not sure I'd be so jazzed up about taking. Christian Watson, without the injury concern, might have been a guy I would have thought of in this spot. But I think you end up, Curtis, needing to look at players that you can reliably expect some volume from, probably in a stronger offense here, with an outlier option to what I just said, potentially being Drake London if you really want to take a swing on some upside. I'm not sure that's the way that I would want to go. So I think you end up with what feels like probably a boring pick, but in the larger context of your roster, probably a pick that ends up being the prudent one to make.
All right. Justin Herbert goes at the 4-4. This room's crawling a bit. Lamar Jackson. I think everyone's kind of staring at this board and realizing that it's wide open. Unstacked Herbert. DKB says unstacked Herbert going as QB4 is surprising.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, Mike Williams can last until that 5th round area. Maybe he's hoping and praying.
Then you have a fallback too with the rookie as well. So maybe that's kind of
you could take Quentin Johnston. You could go super late with Josh Palmer in the event that one of the guys in front gets injured. You could go with Gerald Everett if you want to wait on the tight end. So there's still some ways that you can get around that, but at the same time, if the Chargers break out in the way that we've been talking about all summer, it may not, it may not matter. Naked Herbert might be the type of guy that, throws for 4,800 yards and 40 touchdowns, and you don't really care. It's leverage on the teams that you're playing that, might have one of those wide receivers once you get into the tournament, right? So unfortunately, Dave, Deebo and Amari Cooper go before it gets to our spot. Ben, I see your question there. We'll get to you right after this pick. I want to focus at the 4-5 turn. I think there's a good question about FFPC rules in the main event here. So we'll get to that after our picks. If we have to make a conviction play at the 4-5 here, for me, I think it's Deontay. There's been all this positive, steam on Deontay and the Steelers offense. Kenny Pickett looked really, he was sterling throughout the preseason. If he takes a step forward, Deontay just had such a bad run, not getting the touchdowns last season. You know, he's the poster boy for regression in 2023. He had almost 150 targets, I think, last year off the top of my head. So if we're gonna cram in a receiver here, it would be him. If we're looking at the other positions, I mean, it's like, you know, would we want Kenneth Walker? Would we want to go early on a tight end and grab George Kittle? You know, or we can go like a round early on some of our guys that we had preferred to take at that 5-6 turn, Dave, with, you know, James Cook, Javonte Williams, J.K. Dobbins, you know, just basically, you know, reach there.
Yeah,
so what do you like here?
I'm almost interested in kind of throwing out a conviction play. That said, though, I do think that we should go with Deontay Johnson here and then maybe have the conversation about the conviction play at 502.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do that. We buy ourselves a little bit of time and, you know, we can prevent this manager at the 101 from really running pure with some big time wide receivers to stack with Josh Allen there. So yeah, I think it's good. Deontay Johnson's a floor and ceiling play. For sure. I feel like here, but we still have the flexibility to go with one of our classic Curtis and Dave balance builds here if we want. But we can also lean into the hero RB if the right, you know, if the right wide receiver makes it around the turn. So I think the first question is at 502, are you interested in Christian Watson or Drake London? And then, you know, the follow-up is, if not, is it George Kittle or is it going early on RB2? And we're on the clock, Dave.
George Kittle, we've talked about some, and I think some of the concerns that you've had that you might have mentioned with Kittle, I have as well in the context of that San Francisco offense. So for me, it's really going here with one of the younger wide receivers in Watson or London, or trying to get more of that balanced build. So if I look ahead, Curtis, and I start thinking about the players that are going to be available to us at wide receiver later, I feel like it is getting a little scarce, and I actually would prefer to go with one of the, not that running back isn't going to, but I'd rather take a swing on one of these younger guys here and then address our running back needs later. But all right, I will let you chime in.
It's Drake London or Kittle for me. I'm more comfortable with London than Watson.
Okay, let's go London then.
This is a Blair Andrews homage pick here. So there you go, Blair. I think this is the only high stakes Drake London share that I will have, but hey, we can cover it up if it doesn't work out. Having, you know, those bona fide studs and Deontay and Jamar Chase penciled in at the wide receiver 1 and 2 positions there. I want to get on to this question because I think this has been some chatter all over social media the past day or two. So Ben Haskell says, I have a question about how you feel about what FFPC did to all the teams that drafted Taysom Hill as a tight end. And so for those of you that are watching and maybe, you know, are not playing FFPC yourself or just hadn't heard about this, the Saints actually changed Taysom Hill's team position designation the other day. And, you know, they had been classifying Taysom Hill as a tight end over the past couple of seasons, even though he was getting, you know, significant snaps at quarterback and certain packages or even running back. He was classified by the Saints as a tight end. They have reclassified him now as their third string QB. FFPC's rules for, you know, all of their contests have always stated that they will assign the position to players in their drafts the same way that the NFL teams designate the players. Now, unfortunately, that means in some situations, you know, a team changes a player's designation. I mean, it's so rare. I can think of like 5 instances maybe ever that I can remember it happening. And usually it's not, you know, I remember like Logan Thomas going from, you know, quarterback to tight end is one that comes to mind. Maybe something happened with Tim Tebow at one point. I think Ty Montgomery has flipped back and forth between running back and receiver over the years. So it's, you know, there's times where it's happened. The reason that it's tricky with a guy like Taysom Hill, and I understand why people are frustrated, is especially like in best ball drafts where, you know, it's a tight end premium format. and you're thinking, okay, if this guy gets like 9 points, he might end up starting in my lineup. Well, now, he gets redesignated as a QB. I mean, he's never making your lineup, man. So, unless it all just, falls apart in New Orleans and, Derek Carr can't play, Jameis Winston can't play. And, we're living the Taysom Wildcat life for the whole second half of the season. I mean, in 99.99% of scenarios, those picks are all wasted now. Now, in the managed roster leagues, like, the main event, you just drop him. He was probably never going to be used anyway. But I definitely feel for people that were investing in Taysom Hill on that type of theory from a best ball perspective. That being said, it's hard for me to criticize the FFPC on this because they've held to that rule every single time this has happened. And it's not, the frustration would arise out of either not knowing the rule or just, regretting that you took the risk on a player like Taysom Hill. But yeah, Benny, I mean, if you were really invested in him, I feel for you, and, I wish you the best of luck with the outcomes on those teams. And I think all we can ask for as people who play the game is that the games makers stick by the rules, and because the opposite would be true if they said, hey, everyone who drafted Taysom Hill as a tight end, even though he's changed to a QB, we're going to let him stay a tight end now. You would have people with, torches and pitchforks on the other side saying, those should be wasted picks. Those people took risks and now you're bailing them out. And then what if it happens, that one of those rosters ends up, winning after that happens? So yeah, it's really tough. That's why no one wants to be a commissioner in fantasy football, Dave. Like, no one wants to be the commissioner in your home league and make these judgments. It's really hard for these big sites to come up with these rules and stick by them when you literally have tens of millions of dollars flowing through your site. So great question, Ben. I mean, very on topic, and hopefully you feel comfortable with our thoughts there. Let's see here, Dave. What's happened at the 5th round now is now complete. Little slow on wide receiver here. And we're seeing Dallas Goedert go ahead of George Kittle here. We see George Pickens in the middle of the 5th, Tyler Lockett at the end of the 5th, and Joe Burrow makes an appearance towards the end of the 5th. So, a bit of an interesting board. We haven't been in a room like this. We can start talking about our 6-7 picks here. We're thinking probably one more wide receiver and then either a running back or a tight end, depending on the values that fall. I think it's going to start to really open up. A player that we haven't taken yet on one of our teams that I'm interested in, since we're waiting a little bit, I think we're going to be able to find some of those ZRB candidates later in the draft. So I'm kind of interested in, maybe with one of these picks, taking a player like Alvin Kamara. Christian Kirk, if he were to make it to us, would have a lot of appeal. I see you added our boy Ingram. That'd be around early, another round. I just want to make
sure we watch it. Just need to keep our eyes on it.
It's a round earlier than the round early that we normally take him, but hey, we'll have to see what happens. Now, Chris Godwin is still hanging around. I don't expect him to make it to us, but if he did, that'd be a pretty nice value. We haven't been targeting many of the players from the offenses that we don't trust, but we've already kind of ripped that Band-Aid off with the Drake London pick here. So maybe this becomes an NFC South centric team here if we make an investment in Godwin as well. Jerry Jeudy, I don't know if you saw, Dave, actually now has been upgraded to questionable. And while I'm not sure if he'll play in week 1, that is very favorable for him, not missing the whole month of September, which, the early rumors had been he could miss several games. So I think Jeudy gets back on our board, even though he had been off it for a while. And, other than that, I mean, beginning of the 7th, we could take a little bit of an early swing on a player like DeAndre Swift if some of those other backs don't make it to us. Do you have any interest in Jonathan Taylor? I don't think we've been able to have the conversation yet.
No, we haven't. But I don't. In round 6, I don't think that I have any interest in Jonathan Taylor. I think it's still such a crucial round to building out your base. And I do think I have significant concerns about what things look like after the pup situation is behind us and things move forward. as I've talked about all offseason, I just have some general concerns about that offense even to begin with. Then you add in these other factors, and I think I would much rather spend this pick here somewhere else.
Yeah. I agree. I just wanted to make sure that we still had alignment on that.
Especially, the other thing on that, just to expound on that a little bit too, is, in a league setting like this, those 4 games are pretty crucial, right? Like, I mean, I think that can make a big difference for your team in a contest like this, especially that one that's so competitive that it's just really hard to stomach.
All right. Jahan Dotson, Chris Godwin. And Dotson, I hadn't said his name yet, but he would have been somebody I was interested in.
Yeah, I'd added him to the queue a little bit ago. We've enjoyed trying to go after Dotson. I think we've got him once or twice so far. There have been a couple of names that I've had my eye on, Curtis, that we've dropped into the queue that haven't had any movement. What I do feel, though, like is as I look down maybe 10, 11, 12 names, there are starting to be more wide receivers with where they'll be available that I'm interested in taking.
Mm-hmm.
So just for everybody that would be listening to this in audio format, the top running backs, right? Well, we'll come back to that in a minute because we got to start to.
Terry McLaurin and Trevor Lawrence go off the board. We're going to be on the clock next. So our queue here, and this is not in any particular order, but we've got Christian Kirk, Alvin Kamara, Jerry Jeudy, DeAndre Swift, Gabe Davis, and Evan Ingram in the queue. Christian Kirk, man, that's just such a gut punch. I was really hoping for him here. He would have been an awesome hedge on Drake London and an immediate flex starter for us. So I think, if we're looking at the upside scenarios for this team, the combination of Alvin Kamara and Jerry Jeudy, I think, of what we've got in our queue would really appeal, and it gets us back into Jeudy at a price that's palatable.
Yep.
I would think that we would take Jeudy here, and then doubt that the 101 manager would take Kamara since he just double tapped running back the past couple rounds.
Yep.
Is that your thought too?
As well, you add on the red suspended on top of that, and it seems to be unlikely that they would go after him. So I would say Jeudy.
Well, let's go Jeudy there. I feel really great about this quartet. This is a dynamic quartet of yellow here through the first 6 rounds, and now we can free swing here. Kamara is a bit of
Curtis too that I just want to mention too. If you go into the range of outcomes tool and you look at Jerry Jeudy, you're going to feel pretty good with the fact that we got him in round 6 to round out these wide receivers that we have.
Yeah, I just hope they don't rush him back. But if I'm Jerry Jeudy and I'm thinking Marvin Mims has looked pretty good in camp, I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I had to test this thing. I haven't had the best luck or perception of my toughness maybe over the first couple of years of my career. So, Kamara and DeAndre Swift being the 2 backs in our queue right now, and then Gabe Davis being another option for us as a big play receiver. But I think Kamara and Swift both set up as players that could have a lot of volume. Dave, I kind of just fully expect, I might be delusional, I just kind of think Kamara is going to have his normal role when he comes back after 3 weeks. Like I just don't expect for Jamal Williams to be dynamic. And, I haven't been super impressed with what I've seen from any of the other players in the backfield. Kendre Miller has been a little bit banged up here and there. And all reports were that Kamara looks, leaner and meaner and every bit as dynamic as he has in past years. And so he gets that upgrade from, Derek Carr, a guy who just rode Josh Jacobs back all season last year. Maybe we get a little bit of a, a last hurrah type year from Alvin Kamara. Now DeAndre Swift goes, so that simplifies things. And I think we just have a positional debate. We've got Ingram, Kamara, and Gabe Davis in there. My vote's Kamara, Dave.
Yeah, I do too, actually. I want to go ahead and make that decision. I feel like the other pieces we might be able to make up for the opportunity cost of going away from them in a couple different ways. Whereas with Kamara here, I feel like we don't really have the opportunity to do that quite as much. I will say, well, we should go ahead and make it.
Yeah, we're good. We got it locked in. I mean, it's not. I mean, Ingram is a temptation, and I know that this is a little bit of uncharted territory for us because we don't usually leave the 7th round. Yeah, we don't leave the 7th round without a tight end on this platform. We haven't done it yet across, I don't know, what, 8 to 10 shared drafts probably between Football Players Championship and main events here.
Yep.
But, it does give us an opportunity to build around some tight ends that, we feel strongly about, and maybe we just double tap 2 in the same range of the draft and hope that one hits. But I'm going to add a guy that I'm kind of envisioning right now.
There's a couple of tight ends too.
And there's guys later, Dave, that I just feel like I told you about a couple last time we drafted that, and a couple years ago when Sean and I finished 12th overall, I think Dalton Schultz was our guy that we took in like round 16 or something. And then all of a sudden he's just starting every week. I mean, you can find these players, tight ends wide open. There's been a lot of talk about the rookies, but I also think there's a lot of veterans in key roles too that could break out. So, maybe we'll get a little creative at that position. That'll give this draft a little bit of a unique flavor compared to some of the other ones we've done. Evan Ingram goes the pick right after us. So you correctly had him queued up for this area. And we were both complaining to each other after looking at the RotoViz ADP for the past 7 days. That's like all the players that we love have just gotten pushed up the boards.
They've been skyrocketing the entire summer.
And everyone is, everyone is finally aligned, and there's more people drafting too, maybe that have just been waiting until these final few days. Maybe they've been focusing on other platforms, and it's just like, okay, this ADP is looking a lot more like, what you've seen on some of the other platforms at this point, regardless of the tight end premium factor. So,
yeah, actually, you know what I've noticed too? There's been some changes on Underdog recently, and I do feel like some of those are coinciding with what you're seeing on FFPC. So there's probably some truth to that now of people switching over where they are playing. So if you look at the guys throughout the summer that we've been on, we had a big push for Joe Mixon back really early on when I think his ADP was in like the 20s, right? We've had strong pushes on Lazard, Van Jefferson, Keenan Allen. I think you could say James Cook to some degree. Who are the other names in there that I'm missing? Obviously, Evan Ingram.
Oh, and in terms of guys that have now risen a couple of rounds?
Of guys that we've been talking about all summer that have now gone up.
Dotson's up like 3 rounds in these tournaments. I mean, some of the rookies have climbed up. Zay Flowers is up a couple rounds. George Pickens and Deontay Johnson have come up a couple rounds. I mean, Breece Hall, after the initial fall and the Dalvin Cook signing, is back up to that 3-4 turn, whereas, you were getting him more at that 4-5 turn after the first couple of weeks. So, I mean, it's just 30% of the players that we prefer over the rest of the field, are guys that have all, buzzed up the board. So, that makes it tough. We're not going to be able to get as many of our guys. I mean, case in point there, Sky Moore, middle of the 7th round.
Right.
He's not going anywhere near this a couple weeks ago. So we do see Jonathan Taylor come off the board as well, the pick before. So, people are starting to get in those big swings. That is an interesting team there, the Jonathan Taylor team, with Travis Kelce, Jalen Waddle, Ramondre Stevenson. Negative reports coming out of New England here in the past 36 hours or so. It's all running together now, Dave, that Ezekiel Elliott might have more of a timeshare there than had been previously reported. I guess it's unsurprising that someone as savvy and experienced as Zeke would come in and win over favor with, some crusty old coaches like Bill O'Brien and Bill Belichick. But, maybe for all the production that Ramondre had last season, maybe the team just wasn't fully enamored there, or maybe they, think it's in their best interest to, monitor the touches for Stevenson instead of making him a true bell cow. But it'd be interesting to see if he can actually pay off on this 3rd round investment that people have been making, really since July. Debo, Pickens, Dotson, and Taylor. I mean, that Taylor pick hits, it's a pretty nice team there from the 1-6. I think it's been executed well. Team number 8, just the 2 wide receivers through round 7. Kind of feels like that Montgomery pick. I don't know. Is that a cover up for the Rachaad White pick earlier? I mean, actually, if I'm thinking about 3 running backs, I wouldn't want to pair together in this area. That's a gross trio.
Yeah, it's really gross.
If I took Madison, White, and Montgomery in successive rounds, I would probably feel like I needed to cover those picks up too. Would have rather seen that manager, go with, even somebody like Brandon Cooks or Gabe Davis, somebody at the wide receiver position.
Jordan Addison, who went after.
Yeah.
Would have been a better pick there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
A couple other teams a little light on wide receiver here at the corner. Will the 11 and 12 managers get their 3rd wide receiver? So Gabe Davis goes there. I think that was a necessary, kind of interesting to pair Davis with Diggs on a non-Allen team.
Yep.
And you're, with this investment, you're presuming him to be a flex player.
Yep.
So we'll have to see how that goes. I did just drop a question in the chat. If you're listening on the pod, later to this, what does the chat think about the draft so far? Are you in on Jerry Jeudy or Alvin Kamara? Would anybody have handled this 6-7 turn differently? If you have a strong opinion one way or another, hey, you love it, you want to pat us on the back, or you're like, you guys are freaking crazy. Why didn't you take Evan Ingram there, or there's some other player from the 7th round? We want to hear about it. It makes for good debate, and we're always willing to turn, the magnifying glass on our own drafts. We're just about halfway in, so I'm sure this is a sharp room. It'd be interesting to hear people's feedback.
Yeah. So Curtis, I will say of all of the teams that we have drafted this year, so far, I'm liking this one the least. Normally I leave a draft feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
This one, it's a mixture of, I know why we are putting together a build like this and kind of the reasons that we're doing it. And I think that we've made decisions that aren't necessarily incorrect or the worst decision that you could make. It is just a little bit different. But sometimes those teams where you're maybe just not going with that player that your gut is like, oh, I want to go and draft this guy, end up performing pretty well. So it's also gotten us access to some other players than we've had so far. And now hopefully, we can sprinkle in some of those Curtis and Dave favorites as things start to move along. Of course, as we mentioned, some of those guys are, harder and harder to get these days. But as we hit the turn into round 8, just for the listeners, only with audio here, the quarterbacks, I'm going to read the top 5 available to each position according to the FFPC order. At quarterback, you have Deshaun Watson, Tua, Dak, Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. At running back, you have Pacheco, Dalvin Cook, Herbert, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson. It's funny that those 2 Commanders running backs remain locked in at ADP. At wide receiver, you got Brandon Cooks, Marquise Brown, Cortland Sutton, Michael Thomas, Elijah Moore. And at tight end, there is Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku, Dalton Kincaid, and Tyler Higbee. So, there's still some decent quality of players out there, Curtis. As this round has started, it's gone Mike Evans, Kadarius Toney. One of the things I was curious about was where we're going to see Toney go with the news about Kelsey. Yeah. Especially where it's looking like Toney's injury. I know people will still be a little hesitant to accept it, but it looks like he might be doing a little bit better not quite as bad as people would have expected. So that makes him maybe an intriguing option early on in the season. While we're at it, do you have any thoughts on knowing what we know about Kelsey, if it's going to make you try to push any of these other players in Kansas City up your board any?
I mean, probably not. I mean, I think the 2 that would be interesting if Kelsey was going to really miss time would be Sky Moore and then Jerick McKinnon.
Mm-hmm.
So McKinnon, especially on a team where we're going to need to build out some running back depth to cover up the first couple of weeks for Kamara, I think could really make sense on a squad like this. But, the Chiefs were always going to spread it around outside of Kelsey anyway. Kelsey's just missed so few games in his career. he's a tough guy. You know, he's been on the injury report before and then shown up and just balled out. You know, I don't know if this is week one gamesmanship with the designations, and then it's like just seems convenient that Kadarius Toney is all of a sudden now, you know, practicing with a different designation, or no designation even. You know, 24 hours after the bad Kelsey news. Like, are they just trying to appease the fan base here a little bit? You know, I don't just really take much stock in any of it. I kind of fully expect Kelsey to play. I don't think there's any way a guy that gets as jacked as Kelsey does to play football. I mean, there's no way he's missing that game. And if he's really injured, he's missing a couple games. He's not going to miss one game. He'll go out there and run routes, and you know, maybe he won't play plays where he's not, you know, part of the focal point of the play design. And they'll manage his snaps. I mean, I think there's some really funny tweets from last season from a prominent fantasy site mentioning that Kelsey was falling off because his snap share was diminished.
Yeah.
I won't drag anybody, but it's like, you know, he doesn't need he can go out there and run 60 or 70% of snaps or something like that, and obviously be fine in the fantasy box score. So we are marching right up to our pick here. We have players at the top of the FFPC draft queue are Dalvin Cook, Brandon Cooks, Hollywood Brown, David Njoku, Antonio Gibson. I'll just skip over the quarterbacks because we're not looking at them. Dalton Kincaid, Elijah Moore, Treylon Burks. So a couple of the receivers that I would really like here would actually be Treylon Burks or Brandon Cooks. I would have interest in either one of them. Antonio Gibson has a lot of appeal too. You know, I know Sean prefers Brian Robinson from his Zero RB series this year, and we did make a Brian Robinson pick on one of our teams. It would be nice to have Antonio Gibson maybe on one of the other ones, just to play both sides of that. And then Dalton Kincaid. But I think Kincaid would be more after the 8-9 turn for me.
Right.
And I also would be fine just passing on tight end here. So do you feel like Gibson is the priority with only having two running backs and one of them being suspended?
I do, because in my mind, I like Gibson enough in comparison to the other running backs behind him in this stretch that I'd want to go ahead and get Gibson, have some fill-in likely for those Kamara weeks. And given that there's a couple of guys that I'm okay with us going for at wide receiver right now, I think it makes sense to go with Gibson there. I also think we don't want to get ourselves caught in a trap here where we've waited too far on those running backs and have some roster issues to start off the year. And then hopefully with one of these options that's there at wide receiver, we inject them into this wide receiver core to make up for any lag that you might have with Judy starting the season, or maybe Drake London or Deontay Johnson taking a while to get going. I think that would round things out nicely.
That dirty dog.
It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
I know it's fine. I'm not going to tilt, Dave. I'm not going to tilt over 8-12 Dalton Kincaid, but we're not taking Dalton Knox on this team. It's not going to happen. Yeah, we're not taking. And he takes Treylon too. Now that's a gut punch.
I was kind of hoping for Treylon.
I don't appreciate that. I really don't mind Brandon Cooks here. I think he's got gas left in the tank, and you know he's going to have plenty of opportunity in Dallas to really separate as the number 2 option in that offense.
Yep. Can I just float out real quickly? Have you considered Elijah Moore as our resident Browns fan on any of your teams?
Yeah, I mean, and I have some of them. I just think that, you know, I would feel more sure about what Cooks brings to the table than Moore.
Yep.
You know, and it's,
Yep.
I think there's a wide range of outcomes still you have to consider with Deshaun Watson. And I know Prescott has fallen off a little bit the last couple years. But with Dalton Schultz out of town now, and CD really being the only truly easy guy to project in that offense, I mean, I think it's wide open for Cooks. All of the press was good and positive this summer. And last year was really the first year in Cook's career that we didn't see him, you know, pretty much excel. I guess there was the weird year in Los Angeles too. But for the most part, Cooks has just been, prolific everywhere that he's been. And, to get him as a wide receiver 5 here, especially when we're not going to be depending on him, feels like a really big value pick. I mean, I think, what do we get? Wide receiver 46 there? I mean, I think he's going to outperform that, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely exciting to get him in and onto this squad. After Cooks, we see David Njoku go off the board. So at this point, you have, I believe, I think that for the higher tier tight ends in most people's minds, all of them are gone now, which becomes a little bit interesting to see how we'll fill out tight end on this team. I still think we're going to be able to do it just fine. We see Jamal Williams go. We are now about halfway through round 9. Again, for those of you listening to this in audio format only, on our team right now, we have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, Antonio Gibson, Jamar Chase, Deontay Johnson, Drake London, Jerry Jeudy, and Brandon Cooks. So if we take a look ahead, Curtis, now, and we look at the running backs available, I'll read down the top 12 names that you see when you filter for running back on FFPC. You have AJ Dillon, Zach Charbonnet, Samaje Perine, Raheem Mostert, Jerick McKinnon, Tank Bigsby, Devin Chain, Rashad Penny, Elijah Mitchell, Kenny Gainwell, Tyler Algier, Ezekiel Elliott. So there's still some options at running back that I am fairly interested in adding on to this team. Again, we have 3 running backs at this point, 5 wide receivers. We do know that we do need to address our tight end needs at some point. Do you think pressure's on here to try to scoop up another running back when things come back around to us?
Maybe with one of the picks. It's a Mahomes team. So, I had mentioned Jerick McKinnon earlier. Obviously, I'm always down for a bet on Rashad Penny. I know we both are. And I mean, heck, I'm even willing to hold my nose, I think, in the 11th round and maybe consider Zeke there as well. I mean, the Patriots are they're rolling with two running backs, I think. So, he's going to touch the ball, I think, is the way that math works. At tight end, I don't really feel the pressure because I just feel like it's flat for a long time now. With Cooper Kupp probably missing a few weeks, you could perhaps say, maybe Tyler Higbee deserves to be pushed up the board just a tiny bit here. Now that Njoku has gone off the board as, one of the maybe like the last young, dynamic, projectable guy. And of course, Higbee goes there the second that I mentioned his name. But I mean, we're looking at Dalton Schultz, Sam Laporta, Chigi Okonkwo, Juwan Johnson, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, Luke Musgrave, Jake Ferguson, Irv Smith, Hunter Henry, Hayden Hurst. I mean, honestly, like all those guys. And I just named players that are available all the way down to ADP of 207.
You didn't say Gerald Everett, did you? Is he that far down? Oh,
I did.
Okay, you did. All right.
I did say, yeah. Yep. He would be a pick for us if he slid a half round at the end of round 12.
Right.
I don't think that we would take him around and a half early in round 11, but he could easily slide, 5-6 picks past ADP to us in round 12. So I'm fine considering Gerald Everett, but I think it's going to be hard for him to really earn meaningful volume week to week. I think in best ball in this area, I'm way more in on Gerald Everett. I'm looking for players that have a chance to really, I would love for my tight end to have 5+ targets a week. And I think that's going to be very difficult for Everett to lock down. I think players like Dalton Schultz, like Juwan Johnson, like Cole Kmet, even like Luke Musgrave in a wide open Packers passing game situation. Jake Ferguson, of course, taking over for Dalton Schultz, Hunter Henry in a Patriots system that should be way more effective under Bill O'Brien. Hayden Hurst, probably the number 2 behind Adam Thielen, at least early in the year. Those are all guys that are going to have some volume. I think we're going to want at least one of those. And if we want to mix in an exciting upside guy with that other projectable guy, and then, figure out who's the hot hand and ride him, I think that's fine at that point.
Yep.
I I'd kind of like to get our first guy before Everett.
Yep.
And of the ones available, I'm thinking Jawan Johnson or Cole Kmet feel most attractive. If Higbee had slid, I would have said, hey, let's go there. But at this point, I'm hoping for Johnson or Kmet. I think I like the touchdown upside in those offenses. And, each of them is also still young enough that, maybe they could see, an efficiency improvement or maybe even a role increase in their offense.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that I would be also on board with either of those guys that you just mentioned. I think that it is fairly useful for us to lock in one of those guys here for a couple of reasons. One, we make sure that we get that position filled in our roster, but more importantly, I think it allows us to make better plans of how we navigate the rounds that are going to come after this, knowing that we only need to incorporate one more, or, maybe in the next 5 or so picks, one more tight end versus holding out there. I also think that it's a spot where by the time it comes back to us, the wide receivers might not be that attractive. So, it would kind of make sense to use this as a spot to go after the tight end. In our queue currently, we have some backs, a couple that you've mentioned. So I think we're probably looking at tight end here or running back. As a point of reference, though, best wide receivers available are Juju, Nico Collins, Jacoby Myers, Odell Beckham, Alan Lazard, Adam Thielen, Jamison Williams.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys there that if you wanted to say, hey, let's get our 6th and be done with it, you could make an argument for them. Of the ones that you mentioned, Juju and Nico Collins, probably the easiest to project as having, considerable target market share on their teams because there's just not a lot of competition at that level. And then, if you get in a spot where you got to start him, we've always been willing to go after Alan Lazard, and he's going to be the number 2 in New York. So and even Adam Thielen, but I think his ADP is a little wider.
Right.
I'm not considering him here at that 10-11, but he might last till that 12-13.
Yep.
I totally agree. I think this is a spot for our RB4 with this first pick here. We're looking at, we've got Jerick McKinnon, Rashad Penny, and Ezekiel Elliott in the queue right now. We do not have in the queue Samaje Perine, who is also available, Tank Bigsby, Elijah Mitchell, the others that are kind of in this area from an ADP perspective. You could even say Tyler Algier goes in this area from time to time. A little bit of a run on quarterbacks after.
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, Dak Prescott, Tua, and Deshaun Watson go 3 picks in a row here. Trevor Lawrence, manager, already covering him up with Dak Prescott really early. So 2 quarterbacks in the first 10 rounds for that manager. Samaje Perine and Raheem Mostert actually go before us, Dave. Those managers doing us a bit of a favor, leaving us our preferred guys.
Yep.
So I think the big question is, do we go with McKinnon, who probably will never rise above a bit role in the Chiefs offense, but when we use him, we'd have that stack with Mahomes, and if he pops, it will be in the receiving. So we're kind of double dipping there. Or do we prefer to go with a back like Penny or Elliott, who has that big time contingent value? As
right. Who do you think is higher upside, Penny or Elliott? In a reasonable range of scenarios.
It's honestly a difficult question because of Hurts and how much he can rush. So, I mean, I'm honestly fine even taking 2 of these guys. Why don't we take McKinnon and see if Penny or Elliott makes it back?
Yep. I think I'm perfectly okay with that as well. And then if we are able to do that, then I think that we're covered nicely at running back and could go ahead with other positions for a bit. And then, depending on what's hanging out there, considered again later. So we now have Jacobs, Kamara, Gibson, and McKinnon at running back. McKinnon correlated with Mahomes. Wide receivers are Chase, Johnson, London, Judy, and Cooks. Now, the team that's going to be drafting here, they have their quarterback, they have their tight end, and they are balanced, fairly balanced, 4 wide receivers, 2-3 running backs. So we'll see what they do. I wouldn't be shocked if they ended up double tapping running back here, actually.
Yeah.
You are up next.
No, it goes Laporta.
Oh, wow.
He's
Interesting.
double dipping on the rookie. I wasn't saying Laporta's name because I was just thinking,
Yeah.
he's fallen below ADP a little bit. He would be one that I would bring up, but that manager double taps Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta. Pretty interesting there. So probably a running back with the follow-up pick, I would think, given what's on the board, unless he just feels like, hey, I got to have Juju or Nico Collins on this team.
Right.
Now you are on the clock.
Gerald Everett. So your boy,
Wow.
Dave, way early there.
Way early, yeah.
All
right.
I don't know. I still think, I mean, now, especially with those tight ends coming off the board,
Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go, if you really wanted to go Juwan Johnson or Komet here, fine. I would rather go Penny or Elliott. And I honestly don't even care between the two. I think each of them, their upside is tied to touchdowns, and each of them, their upside is also kind of contingent on earning a larger role. I
think that if we have these guys, there's more scenarios in which we feel good about actually putting Penny into the lineup than Elliott. I don't know if you disagree with that, but I think I'm actually leaning Penny. I'll let you make the pick here, though.
I'm leaning Elliott.
Okay.
The New England backfield is just simpler right now. And
that's true.
When you think about Belichick's past to like what we had, like the weird, like LeGarrette Blount year, like we've just had these situations where, he just every one guy just gets like all the touchdowns. Like, if you're the Patriots, I mean, why are you bringing Ezekiel Elliott in?
Right. I mean, I think it's clear to me that they are not wanting to just go ahead with Stevenson, just use him all the time here.
So we're getting some comments here. So Spurious News says, the Damian Harris year. I mean, that's a perfect example of what we're talking about here. Ryan T says Zeke is garbage, shouldn't even be close to consideration. Think that's a totally fair point.
Zeke could be garbage
a couple rounds ago,
but
you're plugging your nose when you make this pick. But
right,
he now, I mean, he's going to have volume every single week. Right.
I think that you're kind of at a point where you could say that a lot of the running backs are garbage, but really what you're going after here,
every running back after every like round two.
You're just trying to find a point where a team has to rely on garbage to some extent. And in some cases, these teams want to use garbage, right? So
yeah, I mean, these are our spot players. These are our rotational players. I mean, Jacobs is, the running back on this roster that the hat's going to be hung on. And, Kamara starting in week 4. This is a great conversation. So Adam says, what's the tournament winning upside of this team? Can you make a case? So I think the tournament winning upside here is that you actually have a shot at having the wide receiver 1, the QB 1, and the RB 1 all on this squad. Wouldn't have been far off from that scenario on a points per game basis last season. And then what you would have to see along with that is, Deontay Johnson simply regressing in the touchdown department, Drake London year 2 breakout, Jerry Jeudy, actual alpha, and Sean Payton revitalized offense with Russ returning to form, and then Kamara just being normal Kamara when he comes back from suspension. I mean, if that stuff happens, I mean, you have, seven picks that should have gone in like the first 4 rounds. So I think it is easy to make, tournament winning case. You also have the opportunity of stacking, McKinnon with Mahomes, in spots if you find yourself, really needing those big spike weeks. And then, you've got the contingent value of Gibson and Elliott potentially being able to soak up all of the carries in those offenses there. So I think what's nice about this team is it was really easy to make the case of the upside in those top 7 players there. And then when I look at Antonio Gibson, Brandon Cooks, Jerick McKinnon, and Ezekiel Elliott in particular there, those are all players that I feel great about needing to plug in on bye weeks. This is not a squad where I would expect to be desperate on the waiver wire early in the season. Not that we would ignore that as part of the process, but I feel like we're going to, we've got a lot of flexibility at each position. Now, we are going to need to find some tournament winning upside at the tight end position. And so we're going to want to start to collect there. And we've got to be able to compete in that spot in our lineup. So, Adam, I don't know. I mean, let us know. Do you buy the argument, or do you disagree? Berg asks, are you taking 5 tight ends? It feels best 5 tight ends. I mean, in these tournaments, you got to find the conviction, and many people have said it's not novel. I mean, you got to draft like you're right, and so we're not going to take 5 tight ends. I mean, we're going to take a handful and get some information over the first couple of weeks, and if they're the wrong ones, then we're going to have to go get some other ones. And I mean, we can't make trades in these types of leagues, so we do have to have multiples. I don't see the upside in 5 though.
Right. So I think that he also noted, I guess, in managed, it's not necessary.
Yeah,
I guess the thing
absolutely.
I would say here is there are still a couple of guys that Curtis and I have identified as guys we can get late that we think have fairly similar chances to Pat Freiermuth of scoring around those Pat Freiermuth expectations that you might have. So I think it can be kind of easy sometimes to get your mind into the zone that guys like maybe Higbee, Freiermuth, and Joku, maybe Kincaid are, penned in for this certain level of points. There's still some questions about those guys. I like Freiermuth, but I think that, you could make a case saying that if you really sit down and you look at their realistic range of outcomes, is Freiermuth's that different than Cole Kmet, for example, or Juwan Johnson if things break,
it's not different at all. It's actually not different at all.
Right. So that's why, you're able to wait, fill in with a couple of these guys later on, and you might have a tight end grouping of 2 guys that's not that different than if you grabbed Freiermuth and then one of them later on. So, tight end can be hard to really grab those guys that are going to make a significant difference. And it's very possible that if you wait till things get past Dallas Goedert in round 5, all of those guys that really could make a difference are gone. Of course, we have fingers crossed for Evan Ingram as we have him on multiple teams, but I think that factors into it.
Yeah. Berg says, I like the late tight ends a lot. Cade Otton, for example, goes really late. Hunter Henry, great value as well. Yeah, Henry actually has been in our queue for the later rounds for a while. Yep. And Dave just loves saying Cade Otton's name. We were talking about him, I think, even in the wrap-up of last season, early in the Dynasty season. Dave kind of highlighting the sneaky production that he had last year. And so
he fit into that Dawson Knox archetype when I was about Dawson Knox a couple of years back.
Right. Dave created an archetype just for
Dawson
Knox. Yeah. Yep. So we could say that one existed. I feel really great, actually, Dave, about the top 3. The top 3, maybe even 4 tight ends. I would feel great if we could get 2 of them from our queue at the next turn. Adam says this team feels like it may get off to a slow start with the Judy injury and Kamara suspension. The later picks more like flourish than ceiling plays. Teams 1 and 6 have bigger ceiling players in round 7 plus. So let's look at those teams. So on team number 1, we're talking about Kincaid, Burks, Laporta, Everett. Yeah, I mean, I would agree with the Kincaid and Burks picks there. We wanted Kincaid. We feel like Antonio Gibson was a big ceiling play. In round 8, maybe Adam disagrees with that and isn't giving us credit for that selection there. We actually mentioned Gibson, Kincaid, and Burks as the 3 players we wanted at that turn, and we wanted to get 2 of the 3, and then that sharp owner and the 1 spot takes the other 2 after we didn't take Gibson. I think you perhaps you could make an argument that we should have taken Kincaid with not having a tight end there yet, but we felt like we wanted to have that RB2 spot covered, and we like some of the later tight ends. Team 6, Quentin Johnston, Zach Charbonnet, Tua, Rashad Penny. Quentin Johnston is a nice upside play, but I mean, he's starting out as the 4th wide receiver in the offense, at least for the first couple weeks. I don't know if you saw Austin Eckler's interview with Matt Harmon talking about Quentin Johnston. Eckler's pretty enamored with the talent, but he was also saying some things like, hey, once the mentals catch up to the physical skills, he could be special. I mean, that could easily just be a subtle way of throwing some, shade at a team, maybe Shade's too strong, but maybe he's not quite as ready. That would be the only reason that a guy like Josh Palmer would still be running ahead of Quentin Johnston. So we like Quentin Johnston. I mean, Sean's talked about him as being a league winning type player. And Charbonnet, sure. I mean, he's got a lot of contingent value just in the same way that we feel that Antonio Gibson does. So like that, I would say that I would give team one, at least in those rounds of 8 and 9, that combination of Kincaid and Burks. You could argue a higher ceiling than Gibson and Brandon Cooks. The 2 picks that we took there. But I don't think that the Antonio Gibson and Brandon Cooks selections are absent of ceiling. And they may have higher floors. But maybe they're higher floors and just less exciting ceilings there. I think it's fair. And you've got to look at your teams objectively and think about, I mean, hey, you got to compete in this league before you compete in the tournament at the end of the season. And so I think that's great, Adam. Appreciate the comments there as we check in here. Just over halfway through this draft. Unfortunately, Dave, I mean, tight end really getting cleared out here.
Yeah, it is.
In this 12th round. The guy at the top of our queue is a huge priority for me. I'm not even going to say his name, just in the 0.1% chance that these next 2 managers are somehow listening in here.
Do not do it.
Yeah. So we're up next. The 3 tight ends that go off the board that I'm lamenting: Luke Musgrave, Cole Kmet, and Irv Smith. Yep. I thought for certain that Irv Smith would be available even to us at 1302. That's kind of what I had been thinking there. Cincinnati has found a way to get some production out of these guys. Seemingly every year there's like a incumbent role there for the tight end, and Irv Smith's more talented than the people that have been playing it the last couple of years. So Juju and Jonathan Mingo go. Dave, we're going to take Jake Ferguson here from Dallas. Teammates just absolutely raving about him. Dak Prescott said he's going to be a star in the league this year. So we'll see. I mean, you got a star in the helmet. Maybe he can be in star in the league. I've won 5 figures in this tournament before on a late round Dallas tight end. We're going back to that well. So let's see what happens. And we've already heard some of the other names. I think the big question now is, do we feel like we need to reach really early on this tight end too? Because we've got to wait so long for it to come back to us.
By now, things are so saturated that these teams aren't going to be going back to tight end. I mean, we've got there's only one team right now. All right, there's 2 teams 3 teams that don't have a tight end. 2 of those teams have good tight ends. I want to make a case that we don't have to, but I think that if those 3 teams see what's going on and they're thinking like us and then scoop up them, then we could be in a tough spot. So I actually think that we should bite the bullet here and go with another tight end.
Yeah, and it's an opportunity cost situation here, Dave. So, if we look at wide receiver, we're already 5 deep at the position, and our wide receiver 5 is Brandon Cooks, who is the wide receiver 2 on, a pretty good offense.
Yep.
And he's a perennial 1,000 yard type of receiver. And the best available at that position are Allen Lazard, Adam Thielen, and Tyler Boyd. I would rather just wait later and let's get a little upside with maybe some of those rookies like Jalen Hyatt or somebody like that, a little bit later when we go back to that position. And at running back, we're feeling pretty good with our 5 deep now. And you're looking at Damian Harris and Kendre Miller at the top of the queue. That just doesn't excite me. We might as well address this positional need. So, Hunter Henry would be probably my pick here.
Me too. Yep.
We're early. We're like 2 rounds early here, but the buys match up nicely. They cover each other up, and I think there's a pretty good chance that one of these guys gets that 5+ targets a game we're looking for. We're not looking to win the league off either of these picks, but we just want to be able to keep pace with the bottom half of the league that didn't invest, materially at the position. So we'll take Hunter Henry there. We'll take our medicine, and we'll see what's happening there. So let's run down the team here in case anybody has joined the stream late or anybody on the podcast is losing track. We are drafting from the 102 in the FFPC main event. Quarterback is Patrick Mahomes. Running backs are 5 deep. We took Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, Antonio Gibson, Jerick McKinnon, and Ezekiel Elliott. The wide receivers are also 5 deep. We took Jamar Chase, Deontay Johnson, Drake London, Jerry Jeudy, and Brandon Cooks. And now we are 2 deep at tight end with Jake Ferguson, the young potential breakout player in Dallas. And then Hunter Henry, he's been a big time touchdown scorer in the past. And we're just going to see a change in the offensive system in New England this season. And there has been some positive buzz about Henry being the preferred red zone target for Mac Jones. Of course, they're going to have to get down there for Jones to throw him the ball in the end zone for that to even matter.
That's where Zeke comes in. Zeke's just going to matriculate this team down the field. And then, yeah. But no, I mean, I think that, Hunter Henry, 6 touchdowns, I think for him is a fairly realistic possibility. As long as, things play out the way that we would expect them to, at which point in comparison to other guys that are going here, even reaching up a little bit on him I think is okay. Looks like just give me 5,505, I mean, from either of these guys, I'll feel like it's a win, and anything above that, would be awesome. And I think we will probably take a third. I like the idea of either Hayden Hurst or, a big time upside swing, pretty late in the draft would be, Isaiah Likely. He's a player that we will probably be forced to cut at some point, but as long as we're able to hold him, he would obviously have huge contingent value as Mark Andrews backup and a guy who's popped when he's been in the lineup. So that would be a league winning type of play with our tight end depth there. But now, Dave, I mean, we're covered. We're covered at every position here with a little bit of depth. There's no more panic picks. There's nothing like that. I think we can start to kind of get in here with the scalpel and pick the players that we feel do give us that tournament winning upside. So we could potentially look to stack one of our wide receivers if we want to take a second quarterback here. We can look at who that might be, but really I think we start taking some swings on breakout wide receivers and zero RB candidates. Can I just say something unrelated? Our good friend Kirk Cousins is still available here in the 13th round, which would be such a nice way to get a quarterback very late in one of these drafts. Just keep that in mind if you find yourself out there in one of these drafts between now and when the season starts, and the quarterbacks you like go off the board. All right, I digress.
Yeah, Forrest, Kobayashi, and Berg are encouraging us to consider Noah Gray because we get the free look in week 1. I think that, that is interesting, just to take the points, a win is a win is a win. I wouldn't want to go too early, but I think if we get to the point of, those final 4 rounds, we get to round 17, you want to take a free look at some points. I think I'm fine with it at that point. We're basically saying that, he'd be one of our last players before we take a kicker or a defense. So I really don't mind it. Again, for those of you that are joining a little bit late, I do expect Travis Kelce to play tomorrow on the news that he's questionable and it's a bone bruise. I think he'll just tough it out. But perhaps Noah Gray does see an increased snap share. Maybe he scores a touchdown, gets a couple short receptions and post starter worthy numbers. But if he doesn't put a big game up, honestly, it might be difficult. I'd almost be looking to see what happens with Jake Ferguson in week 1. I'm pretty excited about him.
The tricky thing is, I think that Noah Gray probably actually gets a decent snap share in this game, but the snap share, might not be a snap share that matters. I do know I have seen some things on snaps for Gray across the end of last year and how he was becoming more involved. So we'll have to see. I definitely think it's something to keep in mind. But there are a lot of options in an offense such as that. So, time will tell. We're just hoping that Ferguson and Henry will work out for the time being.
Adam says, good luck. There's too many old guys for a RotoViz draft. Hey, listen, man, I love Dynasty as much as the next guy. I love the young breakout players, but, the drafts that only feature the young breakout players. I mean, that's just as volatile and dangerous as, some of these projectable guys. And, I don't think that it's boring to have second year breakout Drake London. I don't think it's boring to have fourth year breakout with new offensive coordinator Jerry Jeudy. I don't think it's boring to have the Washington Commanders receiving back in an Eric Bieniemy offense. So I think
your
just
point
because
is
we're familiar of seeing some of these names, maybe we're getting some hate. We're not going to get rave reviews on every draft we do, Dave. So it is going to be interesting to see.
I'm not going to give this draft rave reviews either. But there's a couple of things, right? I think that some of these players have upside against themselves, which is a little bit different, right, than you might traditionally think about it. I also think that another thing that you could say about this team, which if you're just looking at just this one team for us, it's not going to translate. But I would say that there's actually a little bit of upside in case I get some of the other things wrong that I've done in other drafts, because I don't have many or a combination like this at all on any other teams. So that kind of plays into it here as well at some point. But I do think that this is a team that does look kind of boring. So I could get looking at it and not liking it. I think the thing is that we've made a case for all of these players here, probably after you get past the first three picks, because I think the first three are fine. As to why at the end of the season, you can realistically seeing them being picks that in retrospect are a lot more exciting than they were at the time that you made them.
All right, so Jalen Hyatt goes there, and Rashee Rice. Those both would have been players that we would have been looking at, I think, in round 14 as rookies. They could potentially make some big plays. Rice would have had the appeal, on this Mahomes build. And Hyatt is just, hey, that Giants wide receiver room is wide open. So, that would have been pretty interesting. That being said, we've got Sean Tucker in our queue, the backup in Tampa, who very prolific in college. We've got Hayden Hurst as a potential third guy that, hey, he's a boring name, but we see these later career veteran tight ends find their way to find their way to productivity. And we got to look for that right combination. We're going to have a guy that we can start there. Dave adds Curtis Samuel and Puka to the queue there as well. There's a couple other zero RB type guys.
Yep.
That I like that actually didn't make Sean's article, but that I think have some appeal. That I think, if we were to miss on Sean Tucker here, I think we still got some other running backs that could really break out potentially in the event that McKinnon and Elliott don't pan out for us. There's also, hey, Rice went and Sky Moore went. And I know that he's the boring veteran, but MVS is still hanging out there. He's actually the only sure thing, I think, in the Kansas City offense in terms of being, locked in as a starter. He's probably going to run a lot of routes and not have he's probably going to run a lot of routes per target. But at this point, we're looking for guys that A, are either spot starters or B, could post huge numbers if things pan out in their optimal version of their season. And the optimal version of an MVS season with Kansas City is that in his second year, he's more well-versed in that offense, has earned Patrick Mahomes' trust. Juju isn't there as the bigger name anymore. And, MVS has, endeared himself to the offense, and, they use him as their secondary kind of possession guy who also gets over the top once in a while. You can tell me MVS couldn't put up 1,000 yards if Mahomes is going to throw for 5,000. There's definitely iterations of the 2023 season where that stuff happens. Isaiah Hodgins, Dave, would have some appeal. We already talked about the volatility of the New York Giants wide receiver room there. So tell me what you're thinking here. I like the idea of getting one more upside receiver, but I'm pretty flexible on whether the second pick's a running back or tight end. We're on the clock. Adam Thielen just went. The receivers in our queue are Isaiah Hodgins, MVS, Rashid Shaheed, and then, Puka obviously being a potential play without Cooper Kupp being there. And we've got Sean Tucker, Kyron Williams at running back, and then Hayden Hurst, Isaiah Likely at tight end.
Yep. I kind of like the idea of taking a swing on a high upside wide receiver here. So I'd like to get that injected into this lineup. And I think I actually might prefer to come back around with one of the running backs as opposed to the tight end. I actually think that, let's make this pick here with a wide receiver. You pick your wide receiver, unless you wanted to go somewhere else first.
You want Hodgins or MVS?
I want to say Hodgins actually, but I'll let you. Yeah. We go Hodgins.
Yeah, we'll go there. The back half of the 2022 season, he closed very, very hot. They bring Darren Waller in. He's going to lead this team in targets probably, but it is wide open after that. I mean, Hodgins was really impressive. The team invests in Jalen Hyatt, totally different type of player than Hodgins, and they have like a million of the little slot guys, but Hodgins actually projects as a little differently than the Wandales and the Paris Campbells of the world. Sean
4
Tucker
touchdowns from week 13 on too, which was actually pretty nice.
Yes, absolutely. Sean Tucker goes there at 14-12. He was at the top of our queue from a running back perspective. If we look at the other running backs that are available, I had thrown Kyron Williams in there behind Cam Akers, who's had injury trouble in the past, and the Rams, if they end up just being bad, they get looks at some guys and throw the ball, a little bit. And there's been more, I think, 1A, 1B usage in camp than has been, reported in the national media. But you look at some of those Los Angeles Rams reports, and it's a little bit different than the major media outlets. So some people in the chat saying DPJ.
I do like DPJ here. I'm not actually going to go for it on this team, but I do like it.
Yeah. I have plenty of DPJ in this range, but I think we'll take a swing on a young running back here, kind of with that ZRB mentality. I think Williams is a guy, in this range, we're in round 15 now. You're basically thinking about who are the types of players that could have a big week 1 and be big time waiver claim guys. If it's not people that are going to be starting in any lineups, who are the players that people could run out to go get? Well, the Rams aren't going to have Cooper Kupp in week 1. They're going to have to run, basically a pop gun offense, dink and dunk style, and they'll probably have to, try to keep the game slow and keep it close. I could easily see Kyron Williams getting, 10 plus touches in the first week. In the complementary role to Cam Akers. So we'll have to see if that plays out. Hodgins and Williams are our past 2 picks. Dave, we've got 5 rounds left. We will be taking 1 kicker and 1 defense for sure.
Yep.
So we've got 3 position players left. Of the 2 tight ends in our queue, Hayden Hurst and Isaiah Likely. Do you have a preference there? I kind of like the swing on Likely, even though, he's not guaranteed as much volume initially. That feels kind of like that league winning selection here late in the draft.
Yeah, it's that's a tricky one for me. I guess though, if you phrase things as that league winning, scenario, I don't think you see Hayden Hurst coming and being a league winner. You probably don't have Likely being a league winner either for us. But what maybe makes the change of trajectory for this team, if you have something happen to Andrews, Likely is able to get in, make the most of playing in an offense that should give some, solid goal line looks to those tight ends. I think then I would lean Likely as well. A couple other things about Likely too. We did see him get, week 18, for example, whereas the week that he was going to be involved ends with 13 targets, 8 receptions for 103 yards. So, one of the things that you have seen is in spots where the team does go his way, like week 8, for example, went 6 of 7 for 77 yards and a touchdown. He has shown that when the team does want to rely on to him some extent, he's able to deliver on that. Hayden Hurst at this point in his career in Carolina it's hard to know exactly what to expect. But, I think when I compare and contrast those, it leads me towards likely.
Okay.
Wow, a little bit of run on quarterbacks here.
Yeah, big.
Kirk Cousins finally goes. Dude, if things had come back around, I was going to start talking to you about backing up Patty Mahomes here with some Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I know you love. I know you love some Cousins.
Yep.
Yeah. We'll still get. I think that we will take probably a second quarterback with one of our 3 final picks. I know Mahomes has a little bit of a later bye with week 10, but you just don't want to get blocked out, and you'd want to make sure that you had, upside. Talk about the tournament winning upside. I do think that there are 2 quarterbacks that, if things go right for them, could be in the low end QB1 situation, to where if you got forced to start them for a meaningful number of weeks where, Mahomes missed time, or if you got late in the season, the Chiefs have already sewn up, home field, and, he's going to sit for 2 weeks or something like that. You would hate to see that stuff happen, but you want to have some outs if those things happen. So, Kenny Pickett would have been one of those players. He goes.
I actually really like Jordan Love.
5 of the last 6 picks now, and 7 of the 11 picks in the 15th round have been quarterbacks. Nobody's seeing value at the non-QB positions. Isaiah likely goes sandwiched in there between all of those quarterbacks, Dave. So, that dream dies a little bit early. That's the risk you run. We don't get to pick our draft spot. That 102. Dave, when we were drafting from the 111, you were telling me how much you love drafting from the corners. How you loving drafting from the corners from the 102?
I haven't enjoyed it. I have not enjoyed this. I have not enjoyed this draft.
I will come back to this name when it's our time on the clock. But Forrest actually just said the name of the other QB that I had in the queue.
I think this quarterback has been, this quarterback that you're mentioning has been living in our queue. Pretty much all summer.
The 12 spot manager double taps. Marcus Valdez-Scantling and Hayden Hurst there. So it's just it's
all right though, because Curtis. Well, actually, I say this jokingly. There is one name hanging out there that I do really love here in the tight end listing. There's also another name that potentially could have been interesting, not so much for our team. But I'm just thinking here on other teams for people out there listening. I think even if you found yourself in a position like us, there's still a couple of names out here that maybe aren't that different.
You sound like you're trying to talk like your 10th grade buddy into going out with some girl. Like, she's great. Like, not for me, but like maybe for you. I just put So I just put a tight end that would have, some upside. He's getting none of the buzz of the other rookies, but actually, super well-rounded prospect. We were talking about him as being the number 1 guy, and because of the landing spots, and the presumed year 1 roles for guys like Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid, almost no chatter about this other very early NFL draft pick. So, hopefully he lasts here another 4 picks to our spot. And I think the other pick maybe at this turn would be the other quarterback we're talking about. And there's always a chance. Adam thinks he knows who this quarterback is already. Everyone's just talking about the specific guy's name. I think with this guy, the rushing yardage, he would still have naked appeal would be the answer to that, Adam, but it'll make more sense for the audio only listeners when we talk about the player's name. So we will see. We're starting to see kickers and defenses come off the board here in the 16th round, Dave. Justin Tucker and Harry Butker come off in the middle of the round. Just nothing but QB2s and kickers. The last 12 picks is really interesting and intriguing portion of the draft here, I'm sure.
Yep. So Deuce Vaughn, another guy that I have not found on my teams, but I'm curious to see where he goes there right after Hayden Hurst at the turn there. Josh Culley, a player that we've talked about a lot, goes followed by Kareem Hunt, and we are going to be up next
one more
after.
One more pick.
Justin Roscoe's. All right, one more pick before us. Pulled up some stats here on one of the players that you were talking about here.
You are on
Yeah.
You're
Okay, we
kidding
made
me.
it, Dave. We made it.
Woo!
Can we take Michael Mayer here?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. There we go.
yeah.
There
So,
we go.
I opened up the RotoViz prospect box score scout. And in it, you can do some nifty things where you look at players' profile from college. You can put in draft pick, a couple of other things like that. And you can get a list of players with similar profiles based upon where they were in college. You can look at and see what they did in the NFL, even without adjusting for draft position. You see a lot of like intriguing things in there, right? You see Tyler Eifert, TJ Hawkinson, Zach Ertz, Kyle Pitts, David Njoku. These are the type of players that match Mayer with. Now, of course, as a tight end, as a rookie, often we don't expect a guy to come out and be the version of himself that you'll see years later on. But in Las Vegas, it looks like there are some voids there that he could help to fill and could see, pretty significant run right out of the way. So, for him being the third tight end on our depth chart, I do think it's possible he could make a difference. So now we have Ferguson, Henry, and Mayer, and I'm actually feeling decent about that tight end grouping that we have now.
There we go. We got there. Yeah, you can't judge a picture until the paintbrush is put down, Dave. And you're looking at an unfinished canvas there when it was just Ferguson and Henry, and we waited until round 12. I think this group could get it done. I mean, I really do. I think by the end of the year we could feel like, man, one of these guys was a mega value. Okay, so it's round 17. It's pick 1702. We don't have a kicker or defense yet. If we wanted to go ahead and get a set it and forget it defense, we're not going to be able to wait until 18-11 to take New Orleans. Dallas is just, turnover city. We could go real early and take Dallas if we wanted to do that, maybe get some upside from our defense here. Or, we could go with the quarterback. Sam Howell has been our favorite. I did look at his bye week with Mahomes, though, and he goes to Seattle in week 10. Which is a tough spot. Desmond Ridder would be at Arizona, much easier spot on that same week. So who do you like, Dave? It's wide open for you.
I kind of want to say Ridder, but let's go Howell.
We're going to go Howell anyway. If Howell's that good, then It's not going to matter that they're at Seattle. I don't think there's any universe where we take Howell over Ridder. Just straight up the context of the team. And some people in the chat mentioned very astutely that, hey, you need Drake London to break out. Why wouldn't you just take Ridder on this team? Well, I think the issue is with the low passing volume that we assume will occur in Atlanta. I mean, London could break out just by having a very high target market share without Ridder actually doing a ton. London could have 1,100 receiving yards on, 33% target market share, and Ridder still only throws for like 3,200 yards or something like that. So I think that's the explanation for that. However, I do think, that Falcons team and that NFC South in particular, the NFC South is going to be an interesting spot because I feel like all the teams are bad, but someone's going to win the division. And, some of these players are going to end up posting big time stats because of those 6 matchups against the division teams that they get. And if you look at the Falcons skill position players, I mean, Ridder is a really cheap way to just play that entire offense when you've got, Robinson and London and Cordero Patterson and Kyle Pitts. You've got all of these guys that should be good on their own and are pretty good after the catch too. I mean, why couldn't Ridder be, a middling QB2 or something like that? I mean, I think Sean made that case in one of his breakdowns of one of his FPC drafts. I think a week or two ago, I remember seeing him write something about it. So we're set at QB2. I mean, we're basically set at every position here, Dave, in terms of depth. We're going to get to make one free player pick, and we've got to take our kicker and our defense.
Yep. Of course, there is always, and I don't know if I want to do it on this team, there is the possibility of getting yourself you're those two defenses that have nice matchups to start the season to be able to rotate. But we have a good comment here. Why don't you read that?
Yeah, Forrest has been pretty active here in the past couple of minutes. There's a reasonable chance Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder could both be benched. So adding QB2 this late or later makes sense anyway. You'll probably end up with Aiden O'Connell funneling Mayer TDs. Yeah, I mean, hey, why not? I mean, I don't know how locked and loaded Jimmy is. I don't really care who funnels Michael Mayer TDs as long as somebody is. So yeah, I appreciate the engagement there, Forrest. So from a tight or from a defense perspective, I mentioned New Orleans. They just have a really nice run where you can start them for. You really could start them for 10 straight weeks if you wanted to, and never feel horrible about the matchup. I mean, you might try to stream someone else if you want to get away with it. They go off the board here a full round now at 17-11 before we would have been able to pick it. So we'll have to go a different direction. A common, probably only a 1 week play. Washington is going to be getting that matchup against Arizona in week 1. So a lot of people are going to want to see that. And then beyond that, Dave, I mean, I think we've got a squad where, we took Cleveland. I think we have another squad where we took Jacksonville.
Yep.
As well. And then you can even take Kansas City here. Yep. They may not have Chris Jones, which complicates some things, but you get the free look in week 1, which I think gives them a little bit of additional value. And then, they are, anytime you get these really high scoring offenses, you create, turnover situations for the defenses, even if they're allowing a lot of points, those sacks, fumbles, interceptions, and return touchdowns, those points don't go away regardless of what the other team hangs on you. So, I think we'll have to keep all of that kind of in context. And then for kicker, just strategically, we like kickers with late bye weeks. We like kickers that either play at home in domes or have lots of games that they can play in domes, and maybe offenses that are effective at running the ball, but maybe not necessarily tied to a ton of big players or haven't shown that ability yet. So a common guy that we talk about in round 19, if we end up taking our kicker before the end of the draft, is Younghoe Koo in Atlanta. He's got that week 11 bye. He's got the nice setup there in the dome. But there's other guys that we can talk about here if we want, namely Riley Patterson. You get the free look on Thursday night with him and Detroit against Kansas City. And then you've got some of the bigger leg players too that you can consider. But unfortunately, some of them have, earlier bye weeks. What do you want to do with the third pick that we've got left, Dave? And we're not going to double up on kicker. Do you want to double up on defense, or do you want to take another position player?
I actually want to take another wide receiver. We have the 3 players in the queue there. I'd be happy with any of them. The guy that is in the middle, I actually find fairly interesting, and he just gets selected.
Yeah, that's just the way this room's going, man. It's the way the room's going. What do you think about? I mean, I just don't know if we could afford to hang on to him. It's different than
Nakua, by the way. What'd you say?
Yeah, I don't know if we could hold on to him long enough to realize it. Whereas in best ball, you don't have the option of drafting and dropping. I see, we've got Curtis Samuel, Rashid Shaheed in there. It's really hard for me to see the upside for those players. Maybe more so for Shaheed than Samuel. But a guy like Josh Downs, what's going to happen in Indianapolis? I mean, Richardson's going to throw to somebody. He didn't have the established rapport with Michael Pittman. And behind Pittman, there's basically no knowledge of who's going to be the number 2 target guy. Josh Downs did win the starting slot role. The team actually cut. Oh, geez, I've been up too many hours this week. They signed Isaiah McKenzie, it was.
Right.
And then they cut him and re-signed him after Downs won that role. So that's another rookie, gives us a little bit of upside. If Richardson actually ends up being good and starts connecting on some of these plays, Downs is pretty electric, in college. If we wanted to take another wide receiver, I'd almost rather just maybe try to hit on one of these day two, rookie season breakouts.
Yeah, that works for me.
Wow, you are on the clock.
So
I think he'll be available in the final round. His ADP is
Yep,
319.
agreed. Yep.
So at defense here, we could go Kansas City to get the free look in week 1.
Yep.
Since New Orleans is gone, unless there's another team on the board that you like better.
Well, so there's Jacksonville, who has that easy opening game against Indy. Also, if you look in the SOS streaming app, and of course, it's hard to use last year to get a full year projection for this year. They actually do have the 4th easiest schedule of the remaining teams. They'd have Houston in week 3, Atlanta in like week 4. So that's a decent option, but I don't have a strong conviction there.
I think let's go with Kansas City in the free look.
So general note here, if anybody out there was looking for a team that you could just to have on your roster for the whole year, Tennessee has a lot of games in which you could play them this year. So something to keep in mind, 2 games with Houston, 2 games with Indy. A couple other matchups there with teams that are probably not going to be too difficult. Not that we'd put them on a team like this, but a team that you could have in your back pocket across the year. So we've got the defense now.
The other thing too, Dave, is with a guy like Downs, if we wanted to say he's not going to get drafted anyway. We took Casey here on the premise that we get the free look in week 1. And, it's also been a defense that has had some spike weeks because of the environment they create for the opposition. We could take 2 defenses here.
Yep.
And if Casey or the other defense doesn't pop in week 1, we drop that team and then pick up Downs. I think strategically that may make more sense in terms of our week 1 upside.
I really, really like that.
So would we want to take Washington against Arizona here?
Yep, definitely.
Or, do you like Buffalo or New England as a more of a long-term play better?
Honestly, I think I'd rather get have the possibility of that Washington game in there rather than try to project out Buffalo or New England right now, unless you have a strong lean.
No, I think that's fine. We might even be able to just, stream from within our own team here for a little bit with KC and Washington. So our final
New England's
pick
schedule is tough, man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's tough to be in that AFC East. Every division game they have, is against a premier offense now.
And they open against Philly. There's a lot of tough ones on there.
So in the final round, we'll take our kicker. We'll take our kicker. I hope that our boy Younghoe Koo makes it to the next to last pick of the draft. I don't expect that he will. We could go with the week 1 Riley Patterson option as our backup play. And if he doesn't have a big game on Thursday, we drop him and replace him for Sunday with somebody else.
Yep.
So the team at number 1, Dave, is kind of interesting. This is the squad that took Dalton Kincaid and Sam Laporta.
Hey, let me give them an applause. They just took Dawson Knox.
Yeah. That's where I was going. They spend 2 top 10 round picks on rookie tight ends, and then they hedge those picks with Gerald Everett and Dawson Knox. And they actually stack the Bills tight ends. It's just really interesting. I feel like I really, really, really can sign off on what this team did for the majority of the draft, but I'm not sure if I make those 2 rookie picks there and then I follow that up with Everett. I think I'm probably just done. I don't see the point of taking the Dawson Knox unless the idea is that in week 1, if all this Dalton Kincaid buzz was just for nothing and he's like invisible on the team and Knox is still getting all of the good looks. I mean, maybe that could make some sense. Let's look at these teams here and see who we think our primary competition might be as we try to win this league before we win the whole thing. We've already talked about teams 1 and 6 quite a bit. Is there any other squad that stands out to you as one that you're not looking forward to going head to head against?
Well, team 3, I think could end up being pretty strong. Do like team 10 to some degree.
So team 3 has Tyreek Hill and Devontae Smith as the first 2 picks. Jahmyr Gibbs and Damian Pierce, Christian Watson,
Pierce
Christian
pick,
Kirk, Evan Ingram. Waited all the way till round 13 and 15 for the QBs, but end up with Daniel Jones and Kirk Cousins. I think they share a bye week, so that'll be a problem to solve later on. But
of course,
they've got
by
to
then they're just
figure
gonna
that
be
out.
rolling with Cousins every week, so it's a non-issue.
Yeah. A nice hero RB. I mean, depending on what you think about the running back depth after it, I think that's where it might get a little shaky. But team 4 clearly came into this draft thinking I'm going hero RB. They start with Christian McCaffrey. They then actually follow the instructions from my hero RB draft guide on rotoviz.com by selecting Chris Olave in the second round to pair with McCaffrey, and then also taking a quarterback and tight end within the first 6 rounds. So this is actually a perfectly executed hero RB squad with Olave, DeAndre Hopkins, and Terry McLaurin.
We have a team very similar to that one, I believe. We have a team very similar to that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that we took Hopkins in that spot, but we do have team that's similar to that.
Yeah.
And then even taking Zay Flowers in round 7, which I think is nice when you think about maybe Hopkins being more effective earlier in the year and Flowers emerging by the end. Then we get the trio of Khalil Herbert, Jalen Warren, and Raheem Mostert. I mean, they're all intriguing 0 RB plays, but man, I feel like that trio I could live with a little easier in best ball than in managed league, because it's just like, even if Khalil Herbert ends up being the guy, it's like you're still dealing with Justin Fields and everything that he does as a 1,000-yard rusher, and then Raheem Mostert, even with Jeff Wilson on IR, Devon Achane is healthy and probably going to be sharing there, and you got to think over the course of the long season that the rookie would outlast the 31-year-old. So, I think if that squad, if you had maybe mixed in AJ Dillon instead of Jalen Warren there, or if he had taken Samaje Perine or Jerick McKinnon instead of Raheem Mostert, he could have made either of those plays. I mean, this team could have been really, really executed well. But as I look at the squad after the Mostert pick, I really don't like it at all from there on. So it's like the first half of the draft,
that's true.
The first 7 picks really even. I mean, I got to give it like an A or an A-. It's pretty awesome execution of a hero RB build, and it just kind of got off track there a little bit. If everything goes right early in the draft for team 5, that Eckler, Derrick Henry double up, I mean, that could be really, those guys both stay healthy. I mean, that's just going to be brutal. I mean, that's a buzzsaw. And you got DJ Moore, Amari Cooper, Michael Pittman at those top 3 wide receiver positions, and George Kittle and Trevor Lawrence. So I like what this squad did through the first 7 rounds. Not so sure that I like it after that. Team 6 pretty tough. Kelsey, Waddle, Ramondre, Debo, Pickens, Dotson, Jonathan Taylor if he hits. I think that's going to be an interesting squad to watch. We've got to make our final pick here, Dave. And our boy Younghoe Koo might make it. Tyler Bass went to the team in front of us, so I think he's going to last. I think we might get our guy. What do you call the player before Mr. Irrelevant?
Mr. Pretty irrelevant.
So I think wouldn't the next to last pick actually be the most irrelevant pick? Because the last pick is noteworthy because it's the last pick.
I agree. I mean, I think it depends on how we're chopping things up here in this sentence with commas and other
I mean, I
punctuation,
think
maybe.
yeah, Mr. Irrelevant would be. I mean, if you're the next to last pick, definitely nobody remembers you. Yeah,
Yes,
Forrest.
yes.
Thanks for the good luck wishes, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah, stop by during the season too. Make sure you check in.
Yeah, absolutely. We will be streaming. I mean, hey, this is our last live draft streaming event, obviously, of the season, unless we get desperate to spend another evening with each other tomorrow and enter a Thursday night football draft. It's been done before, but what you'll find starting in week 2 from us on RotoViz Radio and then also on the streams. We're going to be doing some dynasty talk about my weekly dynasty piece that's going to be on the site. We'll be talking wide receiver and cornerback matchups later on in the week, as that's going to be Dave's kind of focus work for in-season management. And then we're going to have our projection show. It's a projection / start sit show, and that will be a streaming opportunity every week. Then we'll help you guys manage your rosters, answer some of your questions, maybe even get into a little bit of second waiver run of the week type stuff. It's been great. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for all the well wishes. And hey, who knows, Dave, maybe this third main event squad of the year for us will be the one that has the magic.